The thing with poverty is that it can strip a man of dignity and even the right to choices. People say that death is the worst thing that can happen to any man, but poverty snatches a man's life while he still has breath. Everybody has morals until they are being tested with the one thing they have desired or worked hard for their entire life. Tell me, what is happiness without financial stability? In the place of money, why has love hidden its face? In life, nothing would matter at some point if a man cannot provide the basic needs for his family. As Lara watched her three kids sleeping on the old mat, she wondered if she made the right choice. They had returned from school some hours earlier because they were sent home for unpaid fees. Mind you, this would be the third time in the same term. She gave them the last bowl of gari to fill their hungry stomach. Lara's second child grumbled about eating gari 5 times that week, and it was just Wednesday. Our teacher has said eating one particular food all the time is going to cause malnutrition, she had complained. This child was only 4 years old though, but her mouth was sharper than new blades. But she was also very intelligent with a retentive memory. Lara had cajoled them all to eat the gari and after that sent them to sleep, but watching them now broke her heart. When Lara married Greg 10 years ago, she hadn't envisioned a life of penury. They were in love and eager to start a family together because they didn't want to live without each other. And so, right after youth service, they got married, hoping that Greg would get a good job at a reputable firm and life would be great. But guess what? Year after year, they watched their dreams shatter before their very eyes. As the kids began to come and responsibilities started weighing on Greg, they both forgot about the love that drove them into marriage years ago. Greg would go out every single morning and return late at night, but it was the same story. No luck. The jobs around came with meager salaries. It was barely even enough to pay their house rent. Lara couldn't remember the last time she got a new dress for herself. A long time ago, she stopped looking at her reflection in the mirror because she had become a shadow of herself. Then, Greg had almost shed tears when months ago, the doctor had confirmed that Lara was pregnant for the fourth child. Ah, I thought we were being careful, Greg had lamented. Apparently, they weren't careful enough. Children, they say, are a gift from God, and it made Lara wonder if God wasn't being generous with the wrong kind of gift. Don't get her wrong, oh. Lara loved her children and would give her life in exchange for theirs. But what if God blessed them with a better job instead of another pregnancy? Lara went outside to sit down and think about her life all over again, and she still had to ask herself if marrying Greg right after school was the right thing to do. That day, Greg came back earlier than expected, much to Lara's confusion, but Greg had a smile on his face. It seems like God has decided to shine his light on us today, Greg told Lara. He went on to explain to Lara that a politician had come to campaign close to where they worked, and he had been generous to throw wads of cash to them. Greg proudly narrated to Lara how he had been fast enough to lie flat on the ground and grab as many notes as possible. When he counted the money, they amounted to about 20,000 naira, which wasn't what Greg had been able to get for months now. Ah! Tears filled Lara's eyes. Greg shouldn't be out there fighting for naira notes like a common street tout. But then again, that was what life had reduced them to. Greg was happy that he was able to get something, and so Lara ought to also be happy. Lara told Greg about their children lying inside the house while their mates were learning in school. Perhaps they could take the money to school and plead with the headmaster to pardon them. But Greg disagreed. His children would go to school, but first, they needed to eat something other than the gari they had been eating non-stop for days. So, Greg gave Lara all the money and asked her to get something from the supermarket so that they could have a sumptuous family dinner that evening. And off Lara went. On her way, she deliberately paid no attention to anyone. She knew that people were saying all sorts of gossips about her. They mocked her for getting pregnant for the fourth child when they could barely keep a roof over their heads. Sometimes, when Lara passed by, they pointed fingers at her and made snide remarks. One day, all this will be over, Lara often told herself. When she got to the supermarket, she began to make selection of things that she would need to make a delicious dinner. But the cost of things had gone up, and by the time Lara went round the shelves, she realized that her 20,000 naira was as good as nothing. Lara decided to leave and try out the village market. It was a long walk from their street, but she would have to make the sacrifice if she really wanted to make a good dinner tonight. As Lara made her way out of the supermarket, she heard her name. It sounded like her caller knew her fondly, and Lara could only imagine who it was. She turned to answer, and behold, it was a very beautiful and sophisticated woman of about the same age as Lara. It took Lara almost an eternity to realize that the woman standing in front of her was Mandy, an old friend. Please like and subscribe for more interesting stories. The first thing Lara felt was shame. The difference between her and Mandy, even though they were the same age, was glaring. While Lara, married with kids, looked malnourished and wretched, Mandy, very much single, looked classy and beautiful. Mandy insisted that they sat down at the supermarket's restaurant to catch up. Even though Lara was feeling deeply inferior because of her appearance, Mandy didn't mind. She seemed very excited to see her old friend. They sat down and Mandy asked Lara to order for anything she felt like having. But Lara was still feeling ashamed and reserved. So, Mandy ordered a full platter for Lara. Lara's mouth almost opened in utter shock. Ah! The last time she probably saw something as enticing as this was during her wedding to Greg 10 years ago. And Lara immediately thought of her sleeping children. Ah! If only she could take this food platter to them. Anyway, Mandy and Lara began to catch up on old times, and soon enough, Lara began to feel a little bit relaxed around Mandy. There was nothing they didn't talk about, down to Lara getting married to her university boyfriend and Mandy being single. They were still talking when the waitress came for the bill. Right in front of Lara, Mandy brought out a bundle of crispy, clean notes, took a few from it and paid the waitress effortlessly. Then, Lara's eyes widened when Mandy tipped her with some of the notes. Lara could swear that the tip she gave the waitress, who happily went her way, was more than the 20,000 naira she was having. But why was life so unfair? Here was Lara and her husband, Greg, who graduated with good grades and had never done anything illegal in their entire life, struggling to survive, while someone like Mandy, who didn't even have a boyfriend, had more than enough to throw away. Lara eventually asked Mandy what she came to this small supermarket to do, because obviously it seemed like she was way above shopping here. And Mandy told Lara that she owned one of the biggest advertising companies in the city. So, one of her clients who had some groceries in the supermarket wanted her to come and take a look at how his products were doing in the market. Eh? Lara couldn't believe her ears. Mandy was not just rich, but she was also a very successful CEO. Meanwhile, Lara had done nothing with her life other than to pop out babies and watch them wallow in starvation. After that day, Mandy asked Lara to hang out with her again. This time around, Mandy even sent her driver to pick Lara up from her small neighborhood with a flashy car. For the first time, instead of pointing fingers at Lara and raising their noses up in gossip, they stared in awe. Wonder shall never end. The car took Lara to one of the most exotic restaurants that she had only seen in movies. They talked about a lot of things again, and Lara knew that it was time to speak to Mandy. She opened up about her obvious predicament and pleaded with Mandy to help her. Since Mandy ran her own company, she should be able to help in hiring anyone. Also, Lara believed that Mandy would pay better than any of the small companies and organizations in their area. Mandy was more than willing to help. Unfortunately, Lara wasn't physically fit to work for Mandy just yet. She was almost heavily pregnant, and Mandy figured that it would be too stressful for her. Lara then talked about her husband, who was more than fit. Mandy told Lara to ask her husband to come over to her company the very next day for an interview. Lara was beside herself with joy. By the time she got home, news had already spread like wildfire. Gossipers had told Greg that a big car came around to pick Lara earlier in the day, and they could swear that it was a man driving it. Instead of jumping into conclusions and fighting Lara about it, Greg simply asked questions when Lara came back, and she carefully explained who it was that she had gone to meet. Greg believed her because he had heard stories about Mandy from Lara. He was also happy that he would be going for a job interview at a very big company the next day. Lara asked Greg why he didn't believe the words of the gossipers and just begin to fight her like most men would do. Greg took Lara's hands, looked deep into her eyes, and told her that if there was anything he believed strongly, it was that Lara would never break their vows. Despite what they had been going through in the last 10 years, they still loved each other and would never break their vows to each other. It was as though they both renewed their vows to each other all over again, and Greg ended up reassuring Lara that he would do anything possible to provide for her and their children. The next day, Greg went to Mandy's company. Lara stayed at home, worrying and praying at the same time. Their future depended on this job. Lara could feel it in her bones. Meeting Mandy wasn't just a coincidence, it was ordained by God from heaven. For years, they had slept with empty stomachs, praying and asking God to come to their aid. And finally, it seemed like something good was eventually coming their way. Lara didn't sit or rest until Greg came back from Mandy's company, which was hours later. And the moment she saw him, she asked how it went. Lara asked a series of questions all at once. Greg answered all Lara's questions until he got to the most important one. Was he hired? Greg looked at Lara, and for the first time in 10 years, he smiled genuinely as he told Lara that he had been hired. Please don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to turn on your notifications button to get more stories like this. Greg wasn't particularly qualified, but because Mandy wanted to help an old friend, she had to hire him, and she placed him in a position where they were always working together. Greg, on his part, showed nothing but hard work and diligence, making Mandy glad that she had given him a chance. In just 1 month, a lot of things had changed. Because Mandy paid Greg a hefty salary and other bonuses, Greg's appearance began to change. He dressed better with a finer haircut. Wow, indeed, poverty could hide the beauty of anyone, coupled with the fact that Greg was tall and handsome with an athletic body. Sometimes, Mandy and Greg worked late into the night when other staff members had closed for the day. And because of that, Mandy generously gave one of her cars to Greg so that he wouldn't have to worry about getting a taxi late at night. Meanwhile, Lara was basking in the blessing that came in form of Mandy. In less than a month, Greg had moved them out of their small neighborhood to a better apartment and in a more serene neighborhood. He also changed the children's school, and Lara was now registered in a better hospital for antenatal care. Their children were happier than before because they now ate good food and slept under better living conditions. Life was good for Lara and her family. It was as though 10 years of struggling and feeding from hand to mouth had been wiped out in a month. Every single day that Lara woke up, she thanked Mandy profusely for not just coming into their life, but being helpful. Lara was enjoying this new life so much that she wasn't bothered about Greg working closely with Mandy at odd hours, even sometimes during the weekend. Also, Lara believed that the love she and Greg shared, which had been renewed since his new job, was enough to sustain them. Was it? Back at work, Greg continued to give his all. You work so hard to take care of your family, Greg. Lara must be so lucky to have you, Mandy told Greg on one occasion when they were working late at night. Greg thanked Mandy and told her that they owed her for turning their lives around. Mandy and Greg spent some time talking about other things instead of focusing on work as they had always done. And soon enough, it became a thing. They would talk and laugh like best friends when it was just the two of them working. Gradually, they began to grow closer. One night, while they were sharing a joke, Mandy kissed Greg and he couldn't resist her. That was the beginning of an affair between Greg and Mandy, unknown to Lara. Greg began to travel for a couple of days for a supposed business meeting with Mandy too often. Even when Mandy started to visit often, Lara didn't think of it. Then they would hang out sometimes when Mandy wasn't working, and Mandy would talk non-stop about the man that she was seeing. Lara told her how happy she was for her. Mandy was a good woman, and she deserved a family of her own, not knowing that Mandy was gushing about her own husband. When it was Greg's birthday, Mandy bought way too many gifts for him, and it made Lara a little suspicious. But when she spoke to Greg about it, he lied to her that was how she treated all her staff members. Poor Lara believed. This continued until Lara gave birth to her fourth baby. When she went into labor, she called Greg, but he was unavailable. She had to handle the whole situation all by herself. Greg didn't show up until the fifth day, and with the excuse that he had been away for a business trip, Lara became worried. She then began to miss the times when Greg was emotionally and physically available for her. The only thing that Greg now did was pay all the bills and ensure that Lara and her children lacked nothing. At first, Lara enjoyed it. How couldn't she? After a decade of wallowing in abject poverty, anyone in her shoes would have enjoyed the new status, but gradually, the money and comfort couldn't replace her husband's availability, and Lara relayed her concerns to George. For years, you had me whenever you needed me, but we suffered and prayed. Now that things are getting better, you seem unsatisfied, Greg told Lara. He went on to tell her that she couldn't eat her cake and have it. If she wanted a husband who took care of her and provided her needs, she must be willing to endure his absence. However, if she wanted his presence like before, she would have to be ready to go back to eating one meal a day and living under a dilapidated house. Lara wasn't pleased with Greg's response, but there was nothing else she could do. One day, Mandy sat in her office and thought about everything that had been going on with Greg for some months now. She realized that for her, it was more than just an affair. Deep down, Mandy wanted what Lara had, a husband and children. She was sick and tired of being the lonely woman without a family to go home to. She could steal weekends and some days with Greg, but it was not enough because at the end of the day, he would still go back to Lara and her four children. Mandy was jealous. She had everything any woman could dream of: money, beauty, and of course, the brains. So why not a husband to complement all that? Later that evening, Mandy let most of the staff members close earlier than usual, and then she invited Greg into her office. Greg thought that it was the usual activity they carried out, but Mandy had something she needed to talk to him about. I am in love with you and I want us to get married. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting stories. Mandy expected Greg to profess his undying love to her as well and jump on the proposal to marry her, but she didn't get that reaction from Greg. I thought we were only having fun, Greg told Mandy. Mandy was deeply hurt. She wasn't just having fun with Greg, she had fallen in love with him, and God brought him her way to answer the prayers that she had been praying for years. Mandy went on to tell Greg that if he agreed to marry her, he would never lack anything in the world. She would make sure that he lived a life of affluence. In fact, she would even open another company for him so that he would become a CEO like her and would not have to work under her any longer. Mandy had a long list of enticing promises for Greg, but Greg told Mandy that as tempting as her offer was, he just couldn't abandon his family. Indeed, Mandy had been a blessing to him, and since he even started having an affair with her, he had been enjoying triple of it. But the truth was that he couldn't kiss his family goodbye. Mandy told Greg that she didn't mind being his second wife. Yes, she was that desperate and in love. But Greg told her that according to the vow he had with Lara, he could not marry another woman for as long as he remained married to her, not even as his second wife. The only way that would happen was if they got a divorce. Mandy suggested to Greg to get a divorce. They could have shared custody of the children and he would still be able to take care of Lara and their children. But Greg turned it all down. He told Mandy that even if he was offered the world, he would not be able to leave Lara because he loved her dearly and they had weathered many storms together. Leaving her now simply because he got a better offer just wouldn't be fair on her, especially as he got the job through Lara. Mandy was heartbroken and enraged. Nothing she did or said could make Greg change his mind. And before Greg left her office that evening, he ended things with her, leaving Mandy more broken. Lara was surprised that Greg returned home earlier than he usually would. She could not recall the last time he came home early, but Greg said that it was because he had a confession to make to her. Greg took Lara into their bedroom and told her everything that happened between him and Mandy, all the late nights, the business trips, and the weekends away from home. He had been spending them with Mandy. Lara was completely shattered. She would never have thought that Greg would break their marriage vow, and worse, he did it with someone she considered an old friend. I have broken not just our vow, but your trust and the love that we share, Please, Lara, forgive me. I deeply regret what I have done, and I'm willing to spend the rest of my life making up for it. Greg begged her with sorrowful tears. Lara cried as well. While Greg cried for his mistake and what he had brought upon their home, Lara wept for the effect of what money had done to her family. For days, Greg refused to go to work. Lara, on her part, refused to speak to Greg. She was too broken to even stand the sight of him. Greg bought her flowers and gifts. He wrote romantic notes, apologizing to her over and over again. He even cooked for Lara. What didn't he do? But Lara was like a brick wall that could not be penetrated, and he couldn't blame her because the hurt and betrayal cut deep. Then, 2 weeks later, Mandy paid Lara a visit. It was as though she knew that Greg wouldn't be home. When Lara asked her what she wanted, Mandy said she was here to strike a deal with Lara. Without beating about the bush, she showed Lara a check of 20 million naira. If only Lara would divorce Greg so that she could have him, then she would have the money and she could turn her life around for good, including that of her children. It was a lot of money, one that Lara had never dreamed of in her entire life. And if I don't take your bribe? Lara asked Mandy. Mandy told Lara that Greg would be fired. She of all people knew how difficult things had been before she stepped in to help. They would return to their horrible neighborhood and poor house. Their children would return to their old school, and things would go back to being extremely difficult for them. Mandy gave Lara 1 week to make her choice. In the next couple of days, Lara was caught in a state of dilemma. The years of suffering and starving replayed in her mind over and over again, and she kept asking herself if she wanted to go back to that life or even put her children through such. It would have been different if she was going back to that life with a husband who hadn't betrayed her. But on the other hand, Lara still loved Greg, despite the fact that she was broken-hearted. Should she truly leave Greg for Mandy? In the last 2 weeks, Greg had shown deep remorse, and as far as Lara could tell, he hasn't been keeping in touch with Mandy. But could she trust him again? What if another monetary offer came? Would Greg still be quick to betray her and their family? He was only remorseful now because Mandy made demands and it didn't sit well with him. 1 week later, as painful as it was, Lara had made her decision. Do you want to guess the decision she made? Anyway, she got dressed and went to Mandy's office to collect the money, relinquishing her husband to Mandy and choosing to start her own life afresh. Don't forget to like, to subscribe, and to turn on your notifications.